Hi folks, welcome to this video series on Introduction to High Performance Computing. You might have heard about terms like HPC, cluster, data center, and compute farms. They all actually means high performance computing. And in this particular video series, we will try to understand what a high performance computing is from a bioinformatician or a user's perspective. The scope of this particular video series is we will look into questions like why do we need HPC cluster, and we try to understand what HPC cluster is, or a high performance computing cluster is, what are its key components, and that is mostly looking from the perspective of a user or from a bioinformatician. How we can access the resources that are available at HPC, and there are two distinct modes we will talk about. One is the interactive sessions and another is the batch job submission. And under batch job submission, we will talk about single and array jobs, and both of them has their distinct pros and cons associated with those. We'll look into those ones, and how basically the next thing which we'll venture into is how the softwares are generally managed on a high performance computing cluster. So in this case, we will be looking module based software management system. We'll also look into some of the methods or some of the commands that will help you to monitor and control jobs that are running on cluster. And finally, we will also look into if you want to transfer your data from the edge high performance computing cluster to your local device or local laptop, how you can do it and how you can move the data other way around, basically from your local laptop to a high performance computing cluster. Before going ahead, I would like to introduce the team who is responsible for putting together the HPC cluster, which is called Xanadu and located at 400 Farmington Avenue. So the cluster is mainly administered by Yukon Health High Performance Computing Facility, which is directed by Professor Ian Mararu, and the facility is administered by Stephen King, Mike Wilson, and Clarissa Trudel. Computational biology core train individuals in how to efficiently use these resources in their research. The computational biology core is directed by Dr. Jill Wagerson. Dr. Vijendra Singh is associate director. Dr. Noah Reid is assistant research professor and a senior bioinformatician with the core. Mia Nahum has recently joined the core, and she's a bioinformatician with the core. So the first question we will look into, or basically that's an introductory video, the first video we'll look into why do we need an HPC cluster, why there is a need of an HPC cluster. So over the last 2 decades, we have seen an exponential growth in the amount of data that is being generated or is available into different research fields as well as non-research fields. And one of but genomics and bioinformatics is such a field. So we are seeing an exponential growth in the amount of data that is available to the researchers to analyze it and make meaningful conclusions from that. But this large amount of data actually comes with 2 key challenges that are associated with it. One of them is the storage, how we can efficiently store this data in a very meaningful way so that later on when we want to analyze it, we can retrieve it as a higher efficiency. We're definitely not going to talk in this video series about the storage part, but another key challenge is the computational resources that are needed to analyze these large volumes of data. And previously, or possibly you might be using your laptop to do some sort of data analysis, but laptop is good enough to do, let's say, a small scale model building or sort of like workflow testing. And for that one, a laptop is good enough. However, when you're trying to use your established workflow and start analyzing your actual big data, laptops are not really sufficient. The resources in terms of RAM and CPUs that are available on your laptop are really not good enough to support that analysis. So what's the next one? So as a next scaling up, in terms of resources, we can look towards desktops, which could have more higher configurations as compared to what you have in the laptop. However, the amount of data what we are talking about now is really way beyond that can be analyzed on a single desktop, even with the most high-end ones. So we need resources to be further scaled up. We cannot infinitely keep on increasing resources on a single desktop because there's a hardware limitations associated with it. So what is the solution? So even there are key challenges in terms of one is like we cannot scale up these desktop machines forever. Another thing is the cost associated with them. So here I'm just basically projecting as just like an idea what is a high configuration a desktop would look like. So these are Mac Pro configurations, which is really for 28 CPUs and different RAMs. And basically storage is pretty much the same. So the differences are with respect to the graphics card, which is nowadays is becoming more critical in doing most of the bioinformatic analysis, the kind of data that is being getting generated. So, however, if you look at the cost is like 33,000 for the configuration 1 and close to like 50,000 for configuration 2. For a single lab to invest that kind of money for a single project, which may be like one of use, is quite a big commitment. So that's why the notion, or basically the high performance computing facilities, are there in the institutes or research environments that are being used by researchers for doing this big data analysis. We'll venture into what HPC is, but what I'm trying to project here is that by having these individual machines are really very expensive, and generally that's the one of the reasons why these HPC machines are set up at an institute level. So we know that data is ever increasing in size. We will see more and more growth in the amount of data, and there are more technologies coming out which gathers data in different formats. So there will be always increase in size of the data. And further, because the type of data we are collecting, the complexity with respect to the data is also increasing, which makes our analysis even more complex. So that basically means the kind of resources we are looking are going to need a further upgrade in terms of if you want to analyze this particular data set. So what's the solution? What could we do next? Like, what is the next thing we can do to facilitate this big data analysis? So one of the like really crude thought is like, what if you buy these multiple desktop machines, which are really high-end configurations, the ones which we saw in our previous slide, and use these high-end desktops and can interconnect them so that they all behaves as a single unit, so that when we are doing our analysis, we have combined resources available from all these desktops in our analysis. And that's pretty much, I want to leave this particular video with the thought that what is the basic idea behind an HPC is nothing but we're buying these high-end desktops which has high configurations in terms of CPUs and RAM, and then we're trying to interconnect them to behave as a single unit. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about what all the factors or what are the different components are there when you're trying to integrate them, and from a user perspective, what are these components which are relevant when we would be looking in using these components in our analysis. So that's possibly is going to be talked about in the next video. Thank you.